I'm sorry, Mrs. Coleman. They want you to use the back entrance. The woman at the front steps wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Coleman, she whispered. I was asked to have you use the service entrance around back. For a moment, I thought I'd misunderstood. Through the glass doors of Beaumont Estate, I could see my daughter-in-law, Madison, smiling beneath the chandeliers. Then I saw my son, Ethan. He saw me, too. Our eyes met, and he did nothing. I tightened my fingers around the small gift I'd brought him and turned toward the parking lot. I had almost reached my car when the mansion's front doors flew open behind me. Paige Coleman, I turned. The owner of Beaumont Estate was hurrying down the steps toward me. If your own child stood silent while someone treated you this way, would you stay or leave? Tell me in the comments. And if stories about family dignity and the truths we sometimes discover too late speak to you, please like and subscribe. 6 days before I found myself standing outside Beaumont Estate with humiliation burning in my chest, Ethan called me on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Charleston, sorting through a stack of mail I had ignored for several days. The house was quiet in the way it had been quiet ever since Robert died 6 years earlier. Not peaceful, just quiet. There was a difference. I still kept his coffee mug in the cabinet beside mine. I still caught myself buying the oatmeal he liked before remembering there was nobody left to eat it. And every now and then when something funny happened, I would turn toward the empty chair across from me before reality arrived. My phone rang. Ethan. Hey, Mom. There was something unusually warm in his voice. Well, hello to you, too, I said. I was beginning to think successful businessmen weren't allowed to call their mothers anymore. He laughed. That laugh took me backward 30 years. When Ethan was 9, he used to sit on a flour sack in the kitchen of our catering business doing homework while Robert chopped vegetables and I prepared invoices. We couldn't always afford a babysitter, so our son grew up around stainless steel counters, delivery boxes, and the smell of baked chicken. Robert and I had started Coleman Catering with almost nothing. He handled the food and transportation. I handled clients' contracts, bookkeeping, and eventually most of the event planning. There were years when 16-hour days were normal. There were Christmas mornings when Robert and I exchanged $20 gifts because Ethan needed braces. There were summers when we didn't take vacations because tuition payments were coming. We never told Ethan those things to make him feel indebted. Parents aren't supposed to hand their children an invoice for being loved. At least that was what Robert always believed. Give him the ladder, he once told me, and don't spend the rest of his life reminding him who held it. So, we didn't. And Ethan climbed. College, graduate school, his first job in commercial real estate. Then bigger projects, bigger clients, better suits. By 41, he was director of business development for a prominent Charleston real estate firm. I was proud of him, maybe too proud to notice what success was slowly taken away. I have some news, Ethan said. I put the mail aside. What happened? The promotion is basically official. I smiled immediately. Oh, Ethan, Senior Vice President of Development. I could hear people talking behind him. That's wonderful. It's not finalized on paper yet, but everyone knows. Your father would be so proud. There was a small pause. Yeah, Ethan said. I know. Then his energy returned. Madison is throwing a party Saturday night. Of course she was. Madison could turn a new set of curtains into a catered reception. She worked in public relations and understood something I never had much patience for: the art of making ordinary events appear important. The Beaumont Estate, Ethan continued. My hand stopped over the envelope I had been opening. Beaumont. Yeah, you know it. I looked toward the dark window above my sink. I've heard of it. That wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Ethan didn't notice. Madison got the venue. There'll be people from the firm, investors, a few local business leaders. Nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy meant $200 a plate in Madison's language. Then Ethan said something I hadn't expected. "Mom, I really want you there." Those 6 words softened something inside me. "Are you sure?" "Why wouldn't I be?" I almost laughed. "Because your wife once suggested I change my blouse before meeting her friends. Because last Thanksgiving, she corrected the way I pronounced the name of a French wine in front of 8 people. Because at Lily's school fundraiser, she introduced me simply as Ethan's mom after spending 5 minutes describing her own parents' careers. Instead, I said, I don't know what people wear to these things anymore. You'll look great. Just come." "All right, promise." "I promise." After we hung up, I sat there smiling longer than I care to admit. Ethan and I had not fought. That would have been easier to understand. We had simply drifted. Phone calls became shorter. Sunday dinners became monthly dinners than occasional ones. Invitations arrived later and felt more formal. Madison never openly said I embarrassed her. She didn't need to. She had a way of turning criticism into concern. "Paige, maybe the pearl earrings instead." "Paige, those shoes are adorable, but the crowd tonight is a little formal." "Paige, let me order for the table." The menu can be confusing. Small things, individually harmless. Together, they formed a message. "You don't quite belong here." Robert would have challenged it immediately. I had spent years telling myself it wasn't worth causing trouble. 2 days before the party, Lily called. Grandma, my granddaughter, never entered a conversation quietly. "Hello, sweetheart. Are you coming Saturday?" "I've been officially summoned." "Yes." Her excitement made me laugh. "I told Dad, I want you next to me." "You did." "Mom has this whole seating chart, but I put your name by mine." I could imagine Madison discovering that unauthorized adjustment. "Don't start an international incident over a chair." Lily giggled. Then her voice softened. "I miss you." 3 words. Children sometimes say what adults spend years avoiding. I miss you, too. Saturday afternoon, I stood in my bedroom staring at 3 dresses. Eventually, I chose the navy one. It wasn't expensive. Robert had bought it for our 35th anniversary. He had stood behind me while I looked at myself in the mirror and said, "That's the one." I had laughed. "You said that about the green one." "No, the green one makes you look elegant." And this, he had kissed my shoulder. "This one makes you look like you." So, I wore navy. I added my pearl earrings, low heels, and a light wrap. For Ethan, I had bought a small leather-bound notebook. When he was young, Robert always carried notebooks to job sites and meetings. He said, important ideas disappeared if you trusted your memory. Inside the cover, I wrote for the next chapter, "Love, Mom." I wrapped it in silver paper. By 6:30, I was driving toward Beaumont Estate. The closer I got, the more memories stirred. Robert beside me in an old delivery van, trays stacked behind us. Bill Beaumont standing on a porch that desperately needed paint. Promises made during years when none of us knew whether our businesses would survive. I pushed those memories away. That story belonged to another lifetime. Tonight was about Ethan. Cars lined the circular drive when I arrived. Men in dark suits and women in evening dresses moved beneath the lights. I parked farther down and walked toward the entrance. Through the tall windows, I could see chandelier servers carrying champagne and Madison in a fitted emerald dress greeting guests. Then I saw Ethan, handsome, confident, surrounded by people. For 1 second, I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep against sacks of flour while his father cleaned the kitchen. I smiled. I climbed the first step. A woman in a black event suit approached me. "Mrs. Coleman." "Yes." She hesitated. Her name tag read: Caroline Hayes. May I speak with you for a moment? Something in her expression made my stomach tighten. Of course. She glanced toward the doors, then back at me. I'm terribly sorry. I was given specific instructions regarding your arrival. My arrival. She lowered her voice. I was asked to have you use the service entrance around back. For several seconds, I simply stared at her. Behind those glass doors, Madison turned in my direction. Then Ethan did, too. My son saw me standing there. He saw Caroline speaking to me. And when Caroline quietly gestured toward the path leading around the building, Ethan stayed exactly where he was. That was the moment something inside me began to break. I wish I could tell you. I confronted Caroline right there on the steps. I didn't. At 68, I had learned that dignity sometimes looks less dramatic than people expect. Sometimes it is simply refusing to beg for a place where someone has decided you don't belong. I looked at Caroline. Who gave you those instructions? Her expression tightened. Mrs. Coleman, I really am sorry. That wasn't my question. She glanced through the glass doors. I followed her eyes. Madison had already turned back toward a couple standing near the entrance. She was smiling again, one hand resting lightly on a man's arm as she spoke. Ethan was still visible behind her. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't come outside. Caroline lowered her voice. Your daughter-in-law made the request. There it was. Not a misunderstanding, not an overzealous employee. Madison. I looked down at the silver-wrapped notebook in my hands for the next chapter. Love, Mom. Suddenly, it seemed foolish. Did she say why Caroline hesitated again? She said the front entrance would be crowded and that you might be more comfortable entering privately. I almost smiled. It was such a Madison sentence, polished enough to repeat in public. Cruel enough to understand in private. And where is this private entrance? Caroline pointed toward a brick path running along the side of the house. Past the kitchen loading area. The kitchen loading area. I had spent half my life using doors like that. When Robert and I ran Coleman Catering, back entrances were where we belonged because we were working. We carried trays through them. We pushed carts through them. We hauled dirty linens and empty crates through them at midnight. I had never been ashamed of honest work. But tonight, I wasn't the caterer. I was Ethan's mother. I had been invited, and someone had decided I needed to be hidden. No, I said. Caroline blinked. I'm sorry, I won't be using the service entrance. Relief briefly crossed her face as though she had been hoping I would refuse. I understand. I think I'll just go home. Mrs. Coleman, please don't worry. You were put in an unfair position. I meant it. She hadn't created the humiliation. She had merely been assigned to deliver it. I turned. Every step toward the parking lot felt heavier than the one before. I could have marched inside. I could have confronted Madison in front of everyone. Part of me wanted to. But then I imagined Ethan's face, the investors watching, whispers spreading through the room, his promotion celebration becoming a story about his mother and wife fighting at the entrance. I couldn't do that to him. That was the cruel irony. Even while my son was allowing me to be humiliated, I was still trying to protect him. I reached my car and pressed the unlock button. Paige Coleman. The voice came from behind me. I stopped. For one strange second, hearing my full name in that place pulled me backward decades. I turned. An older man was coming down the front steps quickly, one hand gripping the railing. His hair had gone almost completely white, and he moved more carefully than the man I remembered, but there was no mistaking him. William Beaumont, Bill. I hadn't seen him in nearly 8 years. He stopped several feet away and stared at me. My God, he said. It is you. Hello, Bill. He crossed the remaining distance and wrapped his arms around me. I wasn't prepared for it. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I hugged him back. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. You disappeared. I didn't disappear. You absolutely did. I sent Christmas cards. Christmas cards aren't visits. Despite everything, I laughed. That seemed to satisfy him. Then Bill looked at my car, the gift in my hand, and finally back toward the mansion. Why are you leaving? The laughter disappeared. It's nothing. His eyebrows rose. Bill Beaumont had never been easily fooled. Paige, I think there was some confusion about the entrance. What confusion? Bill, tonight isn't about me. He turned toward Caroline, who was still standing near the steps. Caroline, she came down slowly. Yes, Mr. Beaumont. What happened, sir? Just tell me. Caroline looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. She took a breath. I was instructed that Mrs. Coleman should enter through the service entrance. Bill's expression changed immediately. By whom, Mrs. Madison Coleman? Bill stared at her. Why? Caroline swallowed. She said Mrs. Coleman would be more comfortable entering privately. Bill's jaw tightened. That's not the whole instruction, is it? Caroline went pale. I looked at her. It's all right, I said. She exhaled. Mrs. Coleman asked that Paige not pass through the main reception area because several important guests and investors would already be arriving. There it was. The sentence Madison had been careful not to say to me directly. Bill turned toward the house. For the first time that evening, I saw anger on his face. No guest of mine gets hidden at the back of my house. Bill, please. He looked at me. I don't want a scene. You aren't making one. This is Ethan's night, and you're his mother. I can go home. Bill stared at me for several seconds. Then his expression softened. Robert would never have let you walk away like this. My throat tightened. Don't bring Robert into this. I have to. No, you don't. Yes, Paige, I do. He stepped closer. Do you remember what Robert told me the night we thought this place was finished? I remembered. I wished I didn't. Bill continued before I could answer. He told me a building isn't worth saving if the people inside it forget how to treat someone standing at the door. My eyes burned. Robert had always talked like that when he was tired. Simple sentences that stayed with you for years. Bill held out his arm. Come inside. I looked toward the glowing windows. I don't belong at your table, Bill. His face changed again. Not anger this time, disbelief. Paige, if anyone in that room has earned the right to walk through my front door, it's you. Behind him, Caroline looked confused. I was certain Madison would be too, and Ethan had no idea what Bill meant. That was because Robert and I had never told him. I looked at Bill's offered arm, then at the service path disappearing around the side of the mansion. Finally, I placed my hand on Bill's arm. All right, he smiled. Together, we turned toward the front entrance. Through the glass, I saw Madison notice us. Her smile vanished. And when Ethan looked from Bill Beaumont to me, I saw something else in his face. Confusion. Because my son was about to discover that his mother had a history in that house he knew nothing about. Walking back toward those front steps felt entirely different from walking away from them. 5 minutes earlier, I had been trying to make myself invisible. Now, the owner of Beaumont Estate had my hand resting on his arm. Bill, I whispered as we reached the first step. Please don't turn this into something bigger than it needs to be. He looked at me. I haven't done anything. You're escorting me into your own party like I'm the governor. It isn't my party. You know what I mean. He smiled faintly. I'm walking an old friend through my front door, Paige. If that makes someone uncomfortable, perhaps they should ask themselves why. Caroline followed several steps behind us. When the doors opened, the sound of conversation washed over me. Then something subtle happened. People noticed Bill, and because they noticed Bill, they noticed me. A man near the champagne table stopped mid-sentence. 2 women turned toward us. One of Ethan's colleagues smiled uncertainly, clearly trying to determine whether I was someone he should recognize. I hated that part most. 5 minutes earlier, I had been considered inappropriate for the room. Now people were curious about me simply because of whose arm I held. Madison saw us first. Her face lost its color. She recovered quickly. That was one of Madison's talents. Mr. Beaumont. She crossed the room toward us, smiling. Then she looked at me. Paige, there you are. There you are. As if I had wandered off. Ethan appeared behind her. Mom. I looked at him. He couldn't quite hold my gaze. Bill spoke first. There seems to have been some confusion at my front entrance. Madison gave a light laugh. Oh, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Caroline had entered behind us. I saw her stiffen. A misunderstanding? Bill asked. Yes, the seating logistics have been complicated all evening. This wasn't about seating. Madison's smile remained, but her eyes sharpened. Of course not. I simply thought Paige might prefer a quieter entrance. The front reception area was becoming crowded. I said nothing. Ethan looked between us. Wait, what happened? Madison touched his arm. Nothing happened. Bill's expression hardened. Your mother was told to use the service entrance. Ethan turned to Madison. What? It wasn't like that. His voice dropped. You told them to send Mom around back. I asked Caroline to make her arrival easier. Caroline spoke quietly. That wasn't exactly the instruction I received. Madison turned. The look she gave Caroline could have frozen water. Before anyone could say more, a voice rang across the room. Grandma Lily came running toward me. She wrapped both arms around my waist. You came. I told you I would. I saved your seat. She looked up at me, then toward her mother. A small crease appeared between her eyebrows. Wait, why are you coming in now? Madison's posture changed. Lily, sweetheart. But Mom said you weren't supposed to come through the front. Silence. Not complete silence. The music continued and glasses still clinked somewhere behind us, but the people nearest us stopped pretending not to listen. Madison stared at her daughter. Lily, what? Go find your friends. But I was just asking now. Lily's face fell. I squeezed her shoulder. It's all right, sweetheart. I'll see you at dinner. She hesitated, then walked away. Ethan watched her go. When he turned back, something had changed. Madison, what did you tell Lily? This is not the place. No, tell me. Madison glanced around. That I wanted the reception area kept organized. That isn't what she said. I finally spoke. Ethan. He looked at me. Did you know? His mouth opened. For a moment, he looked like a boy caught in a lie. Know what that Madison didn't want me around your guests. He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, that's not it's a simple question, Madison interrupted. We discussed keeping the family portion of the evening separate from the networking portion. I kept looking at Ethan. Did you know his silence answered first? Then he said Madison mentioned that tonight was important and that maybe it would be better if you weren't pulled into conversations with investors. There it was. He hadn't ordered the back door, but he had known I was supposed to be kept away from certain people. Why? I asked. Mom, come on. No. I'd like to hear you say it. His eyes dropped. Bill stepped beside me, but I didn't need rescuing now. Madison sighed. Paige, you're making this sound much uglier than it was. I turned to her. I haven't described it at all. That stopped her. Bill looked toward the dining room. Paige will sit with me tonight. Madison blinked. I'm sorry. At my table. Oh, that's very kind, but we already have a seating chart. Bill nodded. I'm sure you do. The head table is reserved for Mr. Reynolds the investors, and my table, Bill said calmly, is reserved for whoever I choose to sit with. Madison's lips parted. No words came. I almost declined. Then I saw Ethan. He looked embarrassed, but for the first time, I wasn't certain whether he was embarrassed by me or by himself. All right, I said. Bill smiled. Good. He led me toward the dining room. As we walked, people greeted him, and he introduced me simply. This is my old friend, Paige Coleman. Old friend. No title, no explanation, no attempt to make me sound more important than I was. And somehow that gave me back something I had almost left in the parking lot. At the table, Bill pulled out the chair beside his. Across the room, Madison was speaking urgently to Ethan. I couldn't hear them, but I saw her glance toward me twice. Not with embarrassment anymore, with worry. Bill noticed, too. He unfolded his napkin. You know, he said quietly. I always wondered whether Robert ever told Ethan about this place. I turned to him about what Bill gave me a look. You know exactly what. My stomach tightened. Don't, Paige. Tonight is complicated enough. He nodded, but I could see the thought had already returned to him. A waiter poured water into my glass. At the far end of the room, Ethan was being congratulated by two executives. Madison stood beside him, smiling again. But now I understood something I hadn't understood outside. Madison hadn't only wanted me away from the front entrance. She had wanted me away from certain people, from Bill, from the investors, maybe even from conversations about the property. And judging by the way she kept watching Bill and me, she was afraid of something I might say. The strange part was I had no intention of saying anything, but Bill Beaumont clearly did. He leaned toward me. Paige, there are things your son should probably know. I stared at him. Not tonight. Bill looked across the room at Ethan, then back at me. We may not get to choose when the past decides to walk through the front door. And for the first time that evening, I wondered whether Madison's carefully planned party was about to become something none of us had expected. Dinner began 20 minutes later. By then, Madison had recovered enough to look almost effortless again. Almost. From my seat beside Bill, I watched her move through the dining room, checking on guests and speaking quietly to servers. To anyone who hadn't witnessed what happened at the entrance, she was the perfect hostess. But every few minutes, her eyes returned to our table. Especially when Bill spoke to me. You still make that ridiculous peach cobbler, he asked. I laughed. Robert's recipe. That wasn't an answer. Christmas and Thanksgiving. Then I've been deprived for 8 years. You survived barely. For the first time that evening, I relaxed. There was something comforting about talking to someone who had known me before I became Ethan's mother or Madison's mother-in-law. Bill had known Robert and me when we were simply Paige and Robert Coleman. Two exhausted people trying to build a business without losing our house. Do you remember the Langford wedding? Bill asked. I groaned. Don't. What happened? Asked the man seated across from us. Bill grinned. Storm knocked out the power 40 minutes before dinner. And your backup generator failed? I added. Bill pointed at me. Exactly. We finished cooking half the meal on portable propane burners and Robert lit the service hall with camping lanterns. The man across from us laughed. Sounds like a disaster. It was, I said. Bill shook his head. It was the night I realized the Colemans were the people you wanted beside you when everything went wrong. I looked down at my plate. Compliments had always made me uncomfortable, especially when they involved Robert. Ethan appeared beside the table. Mind if I steal my mother for a second? Bill looked up. Actually, sit down. Ethan hesitated. Bill nodded toward an empty chair. We were just talking about your father. That got him. Ethan sat. What about Dad? The early days here. Ethan looked at me. You catered events at Beaumont quite a few. You never told me that. You were young. I mean later. I shrugged. It never seemed important. Bill gave a low chuckle. Your mother has a strange definition of important. I shot him a warning glance. He ignored it. Robert was one of the reasons this place survived its early years. Ethan smiled politely because of the catering. Not exactly. Bill. My voice was quiet, but he heard the warning. He looked at me for a moment, then he leaned back. Your parents helped me through a difficult period. Ethan turned toward me. What kind of difficult period? Business problems? I said. Bill's expression suggested that description was laughably incomplete. He let it go for now. Ethan looked around the elegant dining room. I can't imagine this place ever struggling. Oh, it struggled, Bill said. There was a time when I thought I'd lose every brick. When about 27 years ago, Ethan frowned. I would have been 14. About that. He looked at me again. And Dad helped you, your father and your mother. I felt the conversation slipping somewhere I didn't want it to go. We all helped each other back then. Bill shook his head. No, Paige. That's not quite what happened. I put my fork down. Bill. This time he stopped. Ethan noticed. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that needs discussing tonight. Before he could push further, Madison appeared. There you are. Her hand settled on Ethan's shoulder. Mark Reynolds has been looking for you. Ethan glanced toward the head table. I'll be there in a minute. He wanted to introduce you to the Whitmore group. I said, I'll be there. Madison's smile tightened. Then she looked at Bill. I hope you're enjoying dinner. We're so grateful you agreed to host us. Bill smiled politely. You rented the ballroom, Madison. You don't need to be grateful. Something flickered in her face. Of course, Ethan stood. Mom will talk later. I nodded. As they walked away, I noticed Madison whisper something to him. He shook his head. She whispered again. Bill followed my gaze. You know what tonight it really is, don't you? A promotion party? That's the wrapping paper. I turned toward him. What do you mean? He took a sip of water. Ethan's firm has been courting me for almost 4 months. My stomach tightened. For what the South Acreage, I knew exactly which land he meant. The gardens behind the old carriage house, the wooded strip running toward the marsh, and the parcel beyond it. What do they want with it? Luxury residences, 38 units according to their latest proposal. I stared at him, and Ethan is handling it. He's leading the development negotiations. Suddenly, the guest list made sense. The investors, the executives, Madison's obsession with presentation. This party isn't really about his promotion. Oh, I'm sure they're celebrating that, too. But putting me in a room with their investors is hardly accidental. Have you agreed to sell note? Do you plan to, Bill? Looked toward the windows. I haven't decided. Across the room, Ethan stood beside a gay-haired man while Madison introduced him to another couple. He looked confident, professional, exactly as Madison wanted him to look. Does Ethan know you and Robert were friends? Not until tonight, apparently. And Madison Bill's expression changed. I think Madison knows more than Ethan does. That surprised me. Why? She asked my assistant several questions before booking the estate. About previous business relationships, former vendors, people associated with the property. My chest tightened. Did she ask about me? Not by name, as far as I know. I looked toward Madison. She was smiling at someone, but her eyes found mine almost immediately. For the first time, I wondered whether her decision to keep me away from investors had been about more than appearances. Bill placed his napkin beside his plate. Ethan's firm seems very confident about the project, about getting the land. You said you haven't agreed. I haven't. Then why are they confident? Bill studied me. Because they think I'm the only person they need to convince. I went still. He held my gaze. Bill. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. A memory came back to me. Robert sitting at our old kitchen table 27 years earlier. A legal folder opened beneath his hands. Bill pacing near the window. Me signing my name beneath Robert's. I had not thought about those papers in years. I lowered my voice. Is that agreement still active? Bill nodded once. Across the room, Ethan raised his champagne glass while several executives congratulated him. He had no idea. Neither apparently did his company. The land at the center of their carefully planned development wasn't entirely Bill Beaumont's to sell. And somewhere in an old legal agreement was a name none of them had bothered to look closely enough at mine. For several seconds I couldn't hear anything except the blood beating in my ears. The agreement. I had not seen it in years. After Robert died, there had been so many documents to deal with: insurance forms, business records, property papers, retirement accounts, that some things became nothing more than names and folders. The Beaumont agreement had been one of them. Not here, I told Bill quietly. He nodded. I understand. I looked across the room at Ethan. He was laughing with Mark Reynolds and two investors beneath a chandelier large enough to illuminate my entire living room. Madison stood beside him. Everything about the scene suddenly made sense. This wasn't just a celebration. It was a performance, and my son was the centerpiece. A waiter cleared our plates. I excused myself and headed toward the hallway near the garden doors. I needed air. Before I reached them, I heard voices around the corner. Madison, you need to get back to Reynolds, then Ethan. I've spent the entire night with Reynolds because this night matters. So does what happened to my mother. I stopped. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there. You told Caroline to send Mom through the service entrance. I told her to bring Paige in discreetly. Through the kitchen. I didn't specify the kitchen. You knew what the service entrance was. Madison exhaled sharply. Can we please not do this now? When should we do it? When you're not standing 20 feet from the people deciding whether you're ready for senior leadership? There it was again. Image position. People watching. Ethan lowered his voice. You embarrassed her. I was trying to prevent a different kind of embarrassment. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Ethan asked. You know exactly what it means. No. Say it. Madison paused. Your mother doesn't understand rooms like this. I almost laughed. For 25 years, I had worked in rooms exactly like this. I had negotiated with brides, fathers, corporate executives, politicians, attorneys, hotel managers, and wealthy families who believed paying for dinner gave them permission to speak to staff like furniture. I understood those rooms perfectly, perhaps better than Madison did. Ethan said she's not stupid. I didn't say she was. You implied it. I said she doesn't understand how much tonight matters. She understands that it's my promotion party. Madison gave a humorless laugh. This is not a birthday dinner, Ethan. Reynolds is here. Whitmore is here. Beaumont is here. Half the reason we're in this building is because your firm needs Bill comfortable with you. I know. And you've spent months building a specific image. That word stayed with me. Image? What image? Ethan asked. Madison hesitated. The self-made executive. The man who built himself from nothing. My hand tightened around the edge of my wrap. Ethan didn't immediately answer. Madison continued, you've told these people yourself. I worked for everything I have. I know. My parents weren't wealthy. I know that, too. Then what's your point? My point is that you don't need your mother sitting beside an investor explaining how she and your father paid your tuition or helped you get your first apartment. I closed my eyes. So, that was it. For years, Ethan had described himself as self-made. I had heard him say it once at Christmas when discussing an interview his company had published. At the time, I hadn't taken offense. Robert and I never wanted credit. But hearing Madison say it that way made me understand what had happened. Our absence from Ethan's success story wasn't modesty anymore. It was editing. Madison spoke again. Tonight needed to be controlled. Ethan's voice hardened. She's my mother, Madison. Not a problem to control. Then why didn't you say that earlier? Silence. I opened my eyes. Don't pretend you had no idea. Madison continued. I told you I didn't want Paige circulating with the investors. That isn't the same as telling her to use the back door. No, you just knew I didn't want her around your investors, and you said nothing. Another silence, longer this time. Then Madison delivered the sentence that hurt more than everything else. You didn't stop me either. I stepped backward. That was enough. I moved before either of them came around the corner. The garden doors opened onto a stone terrace. Cool night air hit my face. I walked toward the railing and stared at the dark lawn. Self-made. The phrase echoed in my head. I thought about Ethan at 17 sitting at our kitchen table with college brochures. He had wanted a school we couldn't afford. Robert had looked at the tuition figure and whistled. We'll figure it out, he'd said. And we had. Robert took additional weekend events. I accepted corporate lunches I hated. We refinanced equipment. One winter, I wore the same coat for a 5th year because Ethan needed textbooks. Not once did I regret it. That was what made tonight hurt. I didn't need Ethan standing at a podium thanking me for every check. I didn't need my name in his biography. But somewhere along the way, our sacrifices had become inconvenient evidence against the identity he wanted to sell. The garden door opened behind me. I turned, expecting Ethan. It was Lily. There you are. She came toward me. Are you okay? Of course, you don't look okay. Children are dangerous that way. They haven't learned to accept the lies adults tell with their faces. I'm just getting some air. She stood beside me. Mom's mad. I know. Dad's mad, too. I know that, too. She leaned against my arm. I don't understand why everybody cares so much about important people. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. You're important. My throat tightened to you. Isn't that what important means? I looked at her. Maybe at 12, she understood something the rest of us had forgotten. The door opened again. This time, Ethan stepped outside. Lily, your mom is looking for you. She glanced between us. Are you going to yell? No, Ethan said. Lily looked at me. Grandma, no yelling. Satisfied, she went inside. Ethan waited until the door closed. Then he walked toward me. Mom, I looked back over the garden. I'm sorry. For which part? He stopped. The entrance. Only the entrance. His face tightened. I turned toward him. I heard you and Madison. The color drained from his face. How much enough? Mom, I can explain. I studied the man standing in front of me and tried to find the boy who once believed his parents were the strongest people in the world. I don't need an explanation about Madison, I said. He frowned. Then what do you need the truth from you about what? I held his gaze. When you looked through that glass tonight and saw someone telling your mother to go around back, why didn't you move? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And that silence told me we were finally standing in front of the real problem. Ethan looked past me toward the dark garden. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Inside Beaumont Estate, music drifted through the glass doors. Someone laughed loudly. Silverware clinked against china. The party continued as if nothing had happened. Finally, Ethan rubbed his hand across his jaw. I didn't understand what Caroline was saying to you. I stared at him. Ethan, I saw you talking to her. I didn't know she was telling you to go around back, but you knew Madison didn't want me around the investors. His eyes dropped. Yes. The word was barely audible. There was something almost relieving about hearing it. A painful truth is still easier to hold than a polished lie. How long did you know since earlier this week? And what exactly did Madison tell you? She said tonight needed to stay focused. Focused on what the Beaumont project, Reynolds, the investors, my promotion. And I threatened that no. Then why keep me away from them, Mom? It's complicated. I almost smiled. Complicated is what people call something when the simple answer makes them uncomfortable. His face tightened. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. There it was. Not an apology, a defense. Then explain it. If this project works, it changes everything for me. Reynolds has spent 2 years deciding whether I'm senior leadership material. One bad impression matters. I folded my arms. And what impression was I going to make? That isn't what I meant. Then help me understand. He paced 2 steps away. These people are different. I noticed they drink expensive wine. Mom, what? You make jokes when you're uncomfortable, and you avoid questions when you're ashamed. That stopped him. I regretted the word the moment it left my mouth. Not because it was untrue. Because his face told me it had landed exactly where I intended. I'm not ashamed of you. Then what are you afraid they'll see? He stared at me. I stepped closer. When did being my son become something you had to manage? His eyes shifted away. I thought of all the times Robert had warned me not to solve every problem for Ethan. He has to learn to stand in his own weather, Robert used to say. Maybe I had protected Ethan too much. Even tonight, my first instinct had been to leave quietly so his party wouldn't be disturbed. I worked for everything I have, Ethan said. I know. I didn't get handed a job. I know that, too. I spent years building my career. Yes, Ethan. Then why does everyone keep acting like saying I'm self-made as some kind of betrayal? Because nobody is self-made. He frowned. I never asked you and Dad to sacrifice everything. No, you were our child. Children aren't supposed to negotiate the terms of their parents' love. He looked frustrated. So now we're going to list everything you did for me. No, it sounds like it. That hurt. I took a breath before answering. Your father worked 16-hour days because he believed you deserved choices he never had. I took catering jobs. I hated because tuition was due. We didn't do those things so that one day we could present you with a bill. Then why bring them up because you've started treating the people who helped you climb as if they might embarrass you once you reach the top? He looked away. I continued more quietly. I don't need credit, Ethan. Mom, I don't need you telling investors that your mother paid for textbooks or your father worked weekends. I don't need a plaque. I don't need gratitude speeches. My voice trembled despite my effort to control it. But I will not be hidden. He finally looked at me. I didn't tell her to send you through the back. No, I swear I believe you. Relief appeared on his face too quickly. Then I finished. But you gave her permission to believe she could. His expression fell. You knew she wanted me kept away from people who mattered to you. You didn't ask why. You didn't tell her no. I should have. Yes, I made a mistake. It was more than a mistake. What do you want me to say? The truth. I am telling you the truth. No, you're telling me enough truth to end the argument. He went silent. I looked toward the mansion. When Caroline pointed toward that service path, I looked through the glass and saw you. He closed his eyes briefly. I saw you, too. I know. I should have come out. Yes, I don't know why I didn't. I did, but I needed him to discover it himself. I think you do. Before he could answer, the garden door opened. Bill stepped outside. He looked between us. Am I interrupting? Yes, Ethan said. No, I said at the same time. Bill raised an eyebrow. That's helpful. Despite everything, I almost laughed. He walked toward us. Paige, I need a few minutes with you. Can it wait? I'd rather it didn't. Something in his tone changed the atmosphere. Ethan noticed, too. What is this about? Bill looked at me before answering. The old partnership agreement. Ethan frowned. What partnership agreement? I felt that old memory return again. Robert at our kitchen table. Legal papers. Bill exhausted and frightened. My signature beneath Robert's. Bill, I warned. No, he said. But after what you asked me earlier, I checked with my attorney. My stomach tightened. And the agreement is still active exactly as written. Ethan looked from Bill to me. What agreement? Bill didn't answer him. This concerns Paige first. She's my mother, and she's also the party named in the agreement. Ethan stared at me. I could see his mind working. What does that mean? I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Bill gestured toward the house. My library is private. I looked at Ethan. We'll finish our conversation later. Mom, wait. I paused. His voice softened. Is this about the Beaumont property? Bill and I exchanged a glance. That was enough. Ethan's face changed. For the first time all night, ambition disappeared from his expression. In its place was uncertainty. Mom, I walked toward the doors with Bill. Behind me, Ethan called again. What does Dad have to do with Beaumont Estate? I stopped with my hand on the door. For 27 years, Robert and I had kept one chapter of our lives almost entirely to ourselves. Not because it was shameful, because we had never believed generosity needed an audience. I looked back at my son. More than you know. Then I followed Bill inside. Bill's library was at the opposite end of Beaumont Estate, away from the ballroom and the music. The moment he closed the heavy wooden door behind us, the party became a distant hum. I stood near the fireplace while Bill walked toward an antique cabinet built into the wall. You still keep everything on paper? I asked. At my age, paper doesn't suddenly ask me to update a password. Despite myself, I smiled. Robert would have liked that answer. Bill unlocked the cabinet and pulled out a thick brown folder. When he placed it on the desk, I recognized my husband's handwriting before I saw anything else. Beaumont, one word, black ink, Robert's block letters. My chest tightened. I haven't seen that handwriting in 6 years. Bill's expression softened. I'm sorry. I ran my fingers over the folder. What exactly did your attorney say that the agreement remains enforceable? I looked up. After all this time, nothing in the ownership structure changed. Bill opened the folder. The documents inside smelled faintly of old paper. There were bank notices, property surveys, legal correspondence, and finally the agreement. 27 years disappeared. I was 41 again. Ethan was 14. Coleman Catering was finally making enough money that Robert and I had begun talking about replacing our delivery van. Bill, meanwhile, was drowning. Bowman Estate looked impressive from the road, but behind the columns and gardens was a business barely surviving. Repairs had drained his reserves. 2 major events had canceled. A loan had been called early. One rainy evening, Bill came to our house. Robert listened whilst he explained that the bank was preparing to seize part of the property. How much time? Robert asked. 3 weeks. How much money? Bill told us. I remember staring at my husband. The amount was almost exactly what we had saved over several years. Money meant for new equipment, a better van, security. After Bill left, Robert and I sat at the kitchen table until nearly 2 in the morning. We could lose it. I told him. I know. We have Ethan. I know. We're finally stable. I know that, too. I became frustrated. Then stop saying you know. Robert took my hand. Paige, I'm not saying we give Bill the money. What are you saying we invest? That was Robert. Generous but never careless. Over the following days, attorneys created an agreement. Our money helped restructure the immediate debt. In exchange, Robert and I received a minority ownership interest in a specific parcel of the Beaumont property, the south acreage behind the carriage house. At the time, it wasn't especially valuable, mostly gardens, trees, and undeveloped land. Bill kept control of the estate. We held an ownership interest in that parcel and certain approval rights if it were ever sold or substantially redeveloped. Then life moved forward. Beaumont recovered. Coleman Catering grew. The land stayed untouched. Years passed and eventually the agreement became something we simply didn't think about. Robert always said we'd deal with it if the day came, I whispered. Bill nodded. The day came. He pushed a property map toward me. A section had been outlined. I immediately recognized it. The south acreage. Yes. Then he placed another document beside it. A development rendering. Luxury town homes, private road, landscaped courtyard. My eyes moved between the 2 documents. They overlap almost perfectly. I sat down. Ethan's project needs our parcel. Not part of it. Practically all of it. I looked at Bill and his company doesn't know. They know there is a minority interest, but they don't know it's mine. Apparently not. How is that possible? The interest appears under the original Coleman partnership entity in several records. Their preliminary team seems to have assumed I could secure consent. And can you know the word landed heavily? Bill turned to the relevant section of the agreement. For a sale or redevelopment of this parcel, both ownership interests must consent. I read the paragraph, then read it again. Robert's ownership had passed to me under our estate plan, which meant they need my signature. Yes. I leaned back. For the first time all evening, I understood the full absurdity of what had happened. Madison had been worried I might embarrass Ethan in front of the people involved in his project. She had tried to send me behind the building, and the project they were celebrating could not move forward without me. I should have felt satisfaction. I didn't. I felt tired. This isn't funny, Bill. I didn't say it was. You're smiling. Only because Robert would appreciate the irony. I looked toward the closed library door. Ethan doesn't know any of this. No, I should have told him years ago. Why? Because maybe no. Bill's voice was firm. Don't do that to yourself. I looked at him. Ethan didn't need to know you owned land to treat you with respect. That silenced me. He was right. If Ethan only defended me after discovering I had something he needed that wasn't respect. That was leverage. What happens now? I asked. Nothing unless you wanted to. You've been negotiating with them. I've been listening. Would you sell Bill's side? I don't know. And if I refuse, the project in its current form is dead. I stared at the development plan. My son's promotion, his investors, the party outside. Suddenly, all of it seemed connected to the signature I had forgotten I possessed. Bill closed the folder halfway. You don't have to decide tonight. I won't. Good. I looked at Robert's handwriting again. I don't want this used against Ethan. Bill studied me. Even after tonight, especially after tonight. Why? Because if I punish him with money or property, he'll learn the wrong lesson. Bill nodded slowly. Then he said something that stayed with me. They were worried about which door you'd walk through. I looked up. They should have been worried about whether you'd open one for them. Before I could answer, someone knocked. Mr. Beaumont, it was Caroline. Bill opened the door slightly. What is it Mr. Coleman is asking for his mother? I stood outside that library. My son was waiting. 10 minutes earlier, Ethan had thought I was simply his retired mother who didn't belong among his investors. Now I carried a truth capable of changing the biggest deal of his career. But as I walked toward the door, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to use that truth for revenge. I was going to find out who my son became once he learned that the woman he'd allowed to be sent around back was the woman whose signature everyone inside needed. Ethan was waiting outside the library. Madison stood beside him. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I could tell something had changed. Ethan looked confused and worried. Madison looked frightened. Mom, Ethan said, can we talk? We already were. I mean, about the property. Bill stepped out behind me, carrying the folder. Madison's eyes went straight to it. What property? She asked. Ethan looked at her. The Beaumont development. Her face remained composed, but only barely. What does Paige have to do with the development? Bill answered. Quite a lot. Madison turned toward him. I don't understand. 27 years ago, Robert and Paige invested in Beaumont Estate when the business was in financial trouble. Ethan stared at me. You invested here? Yes. How much that isn't important? It seems important. Bill placed the folder on a console table. The investment gave the Colemans a minority ownership interest in the South acreage. Ethan's expression changed. He knew immediately which acreage Bill meant. The South parcel. Yes. The parcel in our development plan. Yes. Ethan looked at me as if I had suddenly become someone else. Dad owned part of it. We both did. And now Robert's interest passed to me. Ethan stared at the folder. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Then he asked the question that mattered. Does the project require your approval? Bill answered before I could. Yes. Silence. Madison's hand tightened around her clutch. How much approval? Bill looked at her. There isn't a percentage of consent, Madison. Either Paige agrees or she doesn't. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Oh my God. I didn't enjoy seeing him panic. He was still my son. That was the complicated thing about being hurt by someone you love. Their pain doesn't automatically become satisfying just because they caused yours. How did the title team miss this? Ethan asked. They didn't entirely, Bill said. Your firm knows a minority ownership interest exists. They apparently assumed I could secure consent. Ethan looked at Bill. And you never told me it was my parents you never asked. That answer landed hard. Madison stepped closer to me. Paige, her voice had changed. Softer, warmer. Mom, I need to say something. Mom, in 15 years, I could count on one hand the number of times Madison had called me that. Usually, I was Paige, sometimes Ethan's mother. But now, suddenly, I was Mom. I am so sorry about earlier. I looked at her. It was never my intention to make you feel unwelcome. Caroline was approaching from the ballroom. She slowed when she heard that. Madison continued, I should have communicated better. Caroline stopped. I turned toward her. Caroline, was Madison's instruction unclear? Madison's head snapped toward her. Caroline swallowed. No, ma'am. Please tell us exactly what you understood. Caroline glanced at Bill, who nodded. She took a breath. I was told Mrs. Paige Coleman should not enter through the main reception because investors would already be present. I was instructed to direct her to the service entrance. Madison's face hardened. That isn't how I phrased it. It was the instruction I received. You misunderstood. I confirmed it with you twice. That ended the argument. Ethan closed his eyes. Madison looked back at me. Paige, I made a terrible judgment call. 5 minutes ago. It had been a misunderstanding. Now that she knew about the land, it had become a terrible judgment call. I wondered what it would become if she learned I intended to sign. I'm sorry, she said again. I heard you. Can you forgive me? This isn't the moment to ask me that. Her expression tightened. Ethan stepped between us. Mom, nobody is asking you to decide anything tonight. Then he hesitated. Although, I almost laughed. Although there is a preliminary consent form. Madison looked relieved. Ethan continued quickly. It isn't the final sale agreement. It just allows the firm to continue due diligence while negotiations proceed. You want me to sign it tonight? No. I mean, if you were comfortable, have I read it? No. Has my attorney read it? I don't know. I don't even have an attorney involved in this. Ethan exhaled. Right. Then why would I sign it? It doesn't commit you to the final transaction. That isn't what I asked. Madison stepped in. Paige, this project has been in development for months. I understand. Ethan has worked incredibly hard. I know. And after everything Ethan has done for you, I would think. She stopped too late. The hallway became silent. I looked directly at her. After everything Ethan has done for me, Madison's lips parted. I only meant, what exactly has Ethan done for me? She looked at Ethan. He looked miserable. I wasn't asking to humiliate him. I genuinely wanted to hear the answer. Madison couldn't provide one. Bill broke the silence. That's an interesting question. Bill, I said. He raised his hand slightly and said nothing more. Ethan stepped toward me. Mom, I'm not asking you to repay anything. I know. And Madison shouldn't have said that. I know that, too. I just need you to understand how important this project is. I do. Then you'll consider it. Yes. Relief crossed his face. But not tonight. His relief disappeared. I need to read everything. I need independent legal advice and I need to understand exactly what you're proposing to do with land Robert and I helped preserve. Madison's jaw tightened. How long will that take? I looked at her. As long as it takes. Bill smiled faintly. I turned toward Caroline. Would you mind bringing my wrap? Of course. Ethan frowned. You're leaving? Yes, Mom. Please don't leave angry. I am angry. His face fell. But I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because I've had enough for one night. Caroline returned with my wrap. I took the silver package from where I had left it beside my chair. For a second, I considered handing it to Ethan. Instead, I kept it, not to punish him. The words I had written inside no longer felt right. For the next chapter, his next chapter had already begun. He simply didn't know what kind of man he wanted to be in it. Bill walked me toward the entrance. This time, nobody suggested another door. At the top of the front steps, I paused. Ethan stood several feet behind us. "Mom," I turned. "Will you call me tomorrow?" "Yes, promise." I looked at him. The same word he'd used when inviting me. This time, it carried much more weight. "I promise." Then I walked down the front steps of Beaumont Estate. No hiding, no service corridor, no shame. And for the first time that night, the person uncertain about where he belonged wasn't me. It was my son. Ethan arrived at my house at 9 the next morning. No Madison, no expensive suit, no polished smile meant for investors. He wore jeans, an old gray sweatshirt, and the expression of a man who hadn't slept much. I opened the door. "You're early. You said you'd call." "It isn't noon yet." "I know." For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then I stepped aside. "Coffee, please." He followed me into the kitchen. That room had seen every version of Ethan. The toddler who threw cereal on the floor. The teenager who slammed doors. The college student who came home exhausted and hungry. The ambitious young man who once sat at that table describing his first real estate job while Robert listened as though Ethan had been elected president. Now he sat in Robert's old chair. I placed coffee in front of him. "Mom, about last night." "Before we talk about last night, I want to show you something." I walked into the hallway and opened the closet beneath the stairs. On the top shelf was a brown storage box, Robert's box. I carried it to the kitchen table. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" "Your father's records." I opened the lid. Robert saved everything. Receipts, bank statements, letters, warranty cards for appliances we hadn't owned in 20 years. I pulled out the first folder. College. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. "You still have my tuition bills." "Your father did." I handed him a statement from his freshman year. He read the amount, then another, then another. His expression slowly changed. "This can't be right." "It is. I had scholarships." "You did?" "I thought they covered most of it." "They covered some." He looked at me. "How did you pay the rest?" "We worked, Mom. We also refinanced some equipment." His head came up. "You borrowed against the catering business for part of it. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were 19. He stared at the paper. I pulled out another folder. Inside were records from the year Ethan graduated. First apartment deposit. Used car loan assistance. A check Robert had written when Ethan moved to Atlanta for his first job. Ethan picked it up. $3,000. You needed a deposit. I thought Dad had extra money that year. We didn't. He looked at me. What did you do? I postponed replacing the catering van. His face tightened. That van barely ran. I remember. Dad hated that thing. He hated your landlord more. A small laugh escaped Ethan before disappearing. Then I found the letters. Not financial records. Letters Ethan had sent from college. "Dad, I got an A on the economics exam." "Mom, don't worry. I'm eating. I think I finally know what I want to do after graduation." Robert had saved everyone. Ethan held them carefully. "Why are you showing me this?" "Not because you owe me. It feels like you think I do." "No." I sat across from him. "Your father kept those because he was proud of you." Not because he was keeping score. Ethan stared at one of the letters. He never told me. Of course he didn't. Why? Because giving you an opportunity was the point. Getting credit wasn't. His eyes filled. He looked down quickly, but I had already seen it. I've been telling people I'm self-made. I know. I didn't mean you and Dad did nothing. I know that, too. He rubbed his forehead. When I started at Harrison Development, everyone around me came from money. Reynolds went to boarding school. Parker's father owns half a shipping company. One guy got his first apartment from his grandmother. I listened. I hated telling them Dad catered weddings. Why? I don't know. Yes, you do. He looked at me because I felt smaller. There it was. Not cruelty, fear. I started changing the story, he continued. Not lying exactly, just leaving things out. Those can become the same thing. I know, he swallowed. Then people started calling me self-made, and I liked it because it made you feel equal to them. He nodded and Madison understood that. She helped me build the image. I leaned back. An image of what? Someone who belonged. I felt more sadness than anger. Ethan, your father, walked into rooms full of millionaires carrying food trays and never once thought they were better than him. I know. No, I don't think you did. His eyes dropped. I was ashamed. The admission was barely a whisper. Of us, of where I came from, that includes us. He nodded. A tear slid down his cheek. I saw you outside last night. I know. I knew something was wrong. I said nothing. I could have walked out. Yes, I should have. Yes, I didn't because Reynolds was talking to me. There was no defense in his voice now, only disgust with himself. I saw my mother standing outside and I decided the conversation I was having was more important. I let the silence sit between us. Then Ethan looked toward the box. Madison shouldn't have done what she did. No, she made the decision. Yes. His eyes met mine. But I made it possible. That was the first thing he'd said since arriving that sounded like real accountability. I nodded. Yes, Ethan. You did. He breathed out slowly. I don't know how to fix that. You don't fix it by getting me to sign a piece of paper. I know. Do you? Yes. He pushed the Beaumont project folder he had brought with him across the table. I brought everything. I didn't touch it. I want you to have your own lawyer review it. That sounds different from last night. Last night, I was scared. And today, still scared. At least he was honest. This deal could determine my career. I understand, but I don't want your signature because you're my mother. Good. I want you to decide whether it's actually a good deal. I studied him. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't selling me something. He was simply sitting in my kitchen. I reached across and closed Robert's box. Your father believed people could make bad choices without becoming bad people. Ethan looked at me. Do I believe choices become character when we keep making them? He nodded slowly. So, what happens now? Now I read in us I looked at the man Robert and I had spent our lives trying to prepare for the world. Now you show me who you are when there isn't a room full of important people watching. Ethan lowered his eyes. Then he picked up his coffee. And for the first time since he'd arrived, neither of us needed to say anything. For the next 4 days, I treated the Beaumont proposal the same way I used to treat catering contracts. I read every page. Then I read the pages nobody expected me to read. Easements, access roads, drainage plans, projected traffic, construction phases, land use restrictions. When Robert and I ran Coleman Catering, I learned quickly that the most expensive sentence in any contract was usually the one someone hoped you would skip. Ethan's company wanted the south acreage for 38 luxury residences, a private access road parking, and landscaped common areas. On the renderings, everything looked beautiful: trees, walking paths, elegant buildings. Then I compared the drawings with Bill's property map. The beauty became more complicated. The access road cut through part of Beaumont's historic garden. Several mature live oaks would disappear. Construction would run dangerously close to the carriage house, and the projected traffic pattern would funnel vehicles toward a commercial block where small local businesses had operated for decades. I called Bill. "Did you see the revised access plan I did? And I hate it." "Then why are you considering it?" He was quiet. "Because maintaining this property isn't getting cheaper." That answer I understood. History was expensive. So is survival. I want to talk to someone who understands zoning. I can recommend an attorney. No one connected to Ethan's company. Bill chuckled. "Robert taught you well." "No. Running a business taught me not to let the person selling me something explain why I should buy it." 2 days later, I had an independent attorney reviewing the agreement. That afternoon, Bill called again. This time, his voice was different. "Paige, are you sitting down? I hate questions that begin that way." Madison contacted Harrison Development's legal department. I stopped writing about what you. The room went still. "What about me?" She wanted to know whether your ownership interest could be bypassed. I said nothing. Bill continued carefully. She asked whether the age of the agreement created any vulnerability and whether the company could force a partition or otherwise acquire the interest without your voluntary consent. My fingers tightened around the pen. "How do you know one of their attorneys called mine?" He wanted clarification on the ownership structure. "Does Ethan know?" "I don't think so." I stood and walked toward the kitchen window. Outside, my neighbor was watering flowers. Such an ordinary scene. Inside my house, something had just shifted. Madison had apologized. She had called me Mom. She had looked me in the eyes and asked for forgiveness. Then she had gone looking for a way around me. "Paige, I'm here. What do you want to do?" The night of the party, I had refused to use my ownership as revenge. I still refused. But forgiveness without boundaries wasn't kindness. It was permission. "I want to see you tomorrow. I'll be here." "And Bill?" "Yes." "Don't tell Ethan yet." He hesitated. "All right." The next morning, I drove to Beaumont Estate. This time I walked through the front entrance without anyone stopping me. Caroline smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, Mrs. Coleman." "Paige." Her smile widened. "Good morning, Paige." Bill had spread the development plans across the library table. I placed my notes beside them. "I won't sign this." He nodded. I assumed. "Not because of Madison." "That surprises me. If I make a property decision because I'm angry with my daughter-in-law, then she controls me twice." Bill leaned back. "So, what's the reason?" I pointed at the plans. "This." We spent the next hour going through my concerns. The garden, the trees, the carriage house, traffic, the surrounding businesses. "What if we changed it?" I asked. Bill frowned. "Changed what? The project?" "Harrison won't like that." "They don't have to like it." That felt strange to say, but it was true. "They need the land," I continued. "We have the land. Why are we acting as though the only choices are yes or no?" Bill's eyes narrowed with interest. "What are you thinking?" "Fewer units." "How many fewer?" "I don't know yet. Enough to move the access road." I pointed toward the eastern boundary. "Preserve the garden. Protect the live oaks. Put construction restrictions around the carriage house." Bill nodded slowly. "And the businesses?" "A community fund. For what? Small business grants, facade improvements, temporary support during construction. Bill stared at me. Funded by whom the development? He smiled. They're going to hate you. They don't know me well enough. He laughed. Then his expression softened. Robert would love this. I looked down at the map. He believed money should leave something better behind. My phone buzzed. Ethan, I answered. Hi, Mom. Reynolds scheduled a meeting for Monday. I know you do. Bill told me. There was a pause. Have you decided? Yes. His voice tightened. And I won't sign the current proposal. Silence. Mom, let me finish. He stopped. I am willing to consider a revised development. What revisions? I'll present them Monday. Can you tell me now? No. Why not? Because I want you to hear them as the project leader, not as my son. Another silence. Then Ethan said, okay, I hadn't expected that. Okay. After we hung up, Bill looked impressed. Maybe he's learning. Maybe. But there was still something Ethan didn't know. Madison had tried to go around me, and Monday's meeting would force more than a property decision. It would force my son to decide what mattered when career, marriage, money, and principle were all sitting at the same table. I gathered my papers. Bill touched the old Beaumont agreement. Are you sure you don't want to kill the deal? I looked around the library Robert had helped save 27 years earlier. No, I thought about being sent toward the service entrance. I don't want to close a door just because someone once tried to close one on me. I place my hand over the revised map. I want to make sure that if we open this one, other people don't get pushed aside. And for the first time since that humiliating night, I wasn't reacting to what Madison had done. I was deciding what I would do next. Monday morning, I arrived at Harrison Development 10 minutes early. The receptionist looked at my Navy folder, then at me. Mrs. Coleman? Yes. They're expecting you in the executive conference room. That sentence almost made me smile. A week earlier, I had apparently been unsuitable for the front entrance of my son's party. Now, an executive conference room was waiting for me. Bill arrived moments later. You nervous? He asked. Should I be? Probably. Then no, he laughed. We entered together. Ethan was already seated at the long walnut table. Madison sat beside him. Across from them were Mark Reynolds, Ethan's division president, two attorneys, the project finance director and a development executive named Charles Whitaker. Ethan stood when he saw me. Morning, Mom. Good morning. Madison gave me a careful smile. Paige, no Mom today. That told me plenty. Bill and I sat opposite them. Reynolds opened the meeting. Mrs. Coleman, thank you for coming. I understand there has been some confusion regarding the ownership structure. No confusion on my end. Charles Whitaker leaned forward. We'd like to make this straightforward for you. I looked at him. How thoughtful. He either missed the sarcasm or ignored it. This is a sophisticated development transaction. Minority ownership structures can seem complicated if you haven't worked extensively in commercial real estate. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I opened my folder. I ran contracts, payroll vendor agreements, financing insurance, and commercial leases for more than 25 years. Whitaker smiled. Of course, but real estate development has particular complexities, I noticed. I pulled out the site plan. For example, your proposed western easement conflicts with the landscaping preservation language in Section 14 of the existing Beaumont Agreement. His smile disappeared. I continued. And your projected traffic model appears to use weekday averages rather than peak event traffic at Beaumont Estate. Was that intentional? The finance director looked toward Whitaker. Nobody answered immediately. I turned a page. Also, your construction schedule allows heavy vehicle access within the route protection zone of 6 mature live oaks. Has an arborist signed off on that? Reynolds looked at Ethan. Has one? Ethan glanced at the project manager. Not to my knowledge. Whitaker cleared his throat. These are technical matters we can address after preliminary consent. No. He blinked. No, these are matters you address before I give preliminary consent. Bill leaned back, visibly enjoying himself. Madison wasn't. Reynolds folded his hands. Mrs. Coleman, what exactly are you proposing? I slid copies of my revised conditions across the table. 26 residences instead of 38. Whitaker shook his head immediately. That destroys the projected return. It reduces it substantially. Then you'll have to decide whether a smaller return is better than no project. The room went quiet. I continued. The access road moves east. The historic garden remains untouched. The live oaks receive permanent protection. Construction around the carriage house is restricted. Reynolds read silently. And this, he tapped the final page. A community fund for neighboring businesses. Yes. Whitaker scoffed. This isn't a charitable project. No, it's a development entering an existing community. We're already bringing economic activity and disruption. Madison finally spoke. Paige, surely some of this could be negotiated later. I looked at her. That is how people lose leverage. Her expression tightened. Whitaker pushed the papers away. This is unrealistic. Then don't do the project. Ethan looked at me sharply. Reynolds leaned back. Let's be clear. Without your consent, the south acreage cannot be incorporated. Correct. And you will not consent under the existing plan. Correct. Madison turned toward Ethan. Say something. He looked at her. What do you want me to say? That this project has been worked on for months. That your team has invested thousands of hours. That your career is attached to this. Ethan's jaw tightened. Madison, no. She needs to understand what's at stake. I understand exactly what's at stake, I said. Madison looked at me. Do you? Ethan interrupted. Enough. The word was quiet but firm. Everyone looked at him. Reynolds spoke. Ethan, you're leading this development. What's your recommendation? I watched my son. This was the moment. No garden conversation, no kitchen table, no private apology. Here were the people whose approval he had chased for years. Here was the career he had been afraid to risk. Madison leaned toward him. The existing project is financially stronger. Ethan stared at the revised plan. Then he looked at me. For a moment, I saw fear. Then something steadier replaced it. My recommendation is that we revise the project. Madison froze. Whitaker stared at him. Excuse me. Ethan straightened. My mother is right about the access issue. She's right about the preservation language. And she's right that we treated minority consent like a formality instead of an ownership right. Reynolds's face gave nothing away. You understand what you're recommending? Yes. 26 units may not meet our return threshold. Then we run the numbers again. Whitaker leaned forward. You're willing to compromise the entire deal over trees and a grant fund. Ethan looked at him. No, I'm unwilling to pretend the people who own the land don't get to decide what happens to it. My throat tightened. Madison whispered. Ethan, think about what you're doing. He turned toward her. I am. She looked stunned. You could lose the promotion. He was silent for a moment, then he said. Maybe. Madison stared at him. Ethan looked toward Reynolds. But if my promotion depends on pressuring my own mother into signing something she doesn't believe in, I shouldn't have it. Nobody moved. I looked down at my hands. I hadn't expected the words to affect me so deeply, not because Ethan had chosen me. I didn't want him choosing his mother over his career simply because I was his mother. What mattered was that for once he had chosen to stand somewhere because he believed it was right. Reynolds closed the proposal. We'll rerun the feasibility analysis. Whitaker began to protest. Reynolds raised a hand. That's enough. The meeting was over. As everyone gathered their papers, Madison walked out without looking at me. Ethan remained behind. I stood. Mom, I turned. Did I do the right thing? I studied him. That depends. On what? Whether you still believe it was right tomorrow if they take the promotion away. He absorbed that, then nodded. I think I will. Bill and I walked toward the door. Behind us, Reynolds called Ethan's name. My son turned back toward the table. I didn't know whether his career had just changed forever. But as I stepped into the hallway, I realized something more important had changed. For the first time since I had seen him through the glass doors of Beaumont Estate, Ethan hadn't stayed silent. For 3 days after the meeting, nobody knew whether there was still a Beaumont project. Harrison Development's finance team reran the numbers, then they ran them again. 26 residences produced a profit, just not the profit Charles Whitaker wanted. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan called me. They're threatening to walk. I was trimming rosemary on my back porch. Are they threatening or are they walking threatening? Then they haven't walked. Mom, this isn't one of your catering negotiations. People threatening to leave because they don't like the price sounds exactly like catering. He laughed despite himself. Then his voice became serious. Reynolds says Whitaker wants the project shelved. And what do you think? A pause. I think we should keep negotiating. Then tell him I did. That mattered. A week earlier, Ethan had been afraid to interrupt an investor conversation to defend his mother. Now he was arguing with executives over a project he had once believed would make his career. The next morning, Bill called. His voice sounded suspiciously cheerful. I have news. Harrison walked. No. Then why do you sound happy? Because they're no longer the only people interested. I stopped pouring coffee. What happened? Word travels. I hate sentences that begin that way. A regional investment group heard we were considering a smaller preservation-focused development and they want to see the revised concept. I sat down. Are they serious? Serious enough to request financials. That changed everything. Harrison could threaten to leave only while they believed we were afraid of losing them. Now we weren't. By Monday, Reynolds had requested another meeting. But before that happened, something far more personal broke open. Ethan and Madison came to my house Sunday afternoon to pick up Lily. She had spent Saturday night with me. I was in the kitchen packing leftover cookies into a container when their voices rose in the living room. This is exactly what I said would happen. Madison snapped. Ethan answered quietly. Keep your voice down. Why, Paige knows how I feel. I stepped toward the doorway but stopped before entering. This project was supposed to secure your promotion, Madison continued. Now Reynolds is questioning everything. He's questioning the financial model because your mother changed it. My mother owns part of the property. And suddenly everyone acts like that makes her a development expert. I walked into the room. Madison saw me. Paige, if you have something to say about me, you don't need to say it from the next room. Ethan stood. Mom, this isn't necessary. No, it probably is. Madison folded her arms. Fine. I waited. You could have signed the original agreement, she said. Yes, you chose not to. Yes. And Ethan may lose a promotion because of it. If his promotion depends on 38 townhouses instead of 26, perhaps his company should reconsider how it evaluates leadership. This is what you do. What you make everything sound reasonable while punishing us. Ethan stepped between us. Madison, stop. No, she wants us to believe this isn't revenge. It isn't. You expect me to believe the back entrance has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with how I see you. It has nothing to do with the land. She stared at me. I continued. If you had welcomed me with a marching band that night, I still wouldn't approve a plan I believe damages the property. Madison laughed bitterly. Convenient. A small voice came from the hallway. Mom, we all turned. Lily stood there holding her backpack. Her face was confused. Sweetheart, Ethan said, go wait in the kitchen. But Lily looked at Madison. Why are you mad at Grandma? This is grown-up business. Because she owns the land, Madison exhaled. Yes, partly. Lily frowned. But you said you were sorry. I am. The room went still. Lily looked at her mother with the simple concentration children use when something doesn't make sense. Then she asked the question none of us could have asked as effectively. Would you still be sorry to Grandma if she didn't own any of that land? Madison froze. Ethan closed his eyes. I felt something inside me tighten. Not satisfaction, sadness. Madison opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Lily waited. Would you, Lily? Ethan said gently. No, I said. Let her ask. Madison's face flushed. Of course I would. But the answer came too late. Even Lily heard it. She looked down. Okay. Then she walked into the kitchen. Ethan stared at his wife. Madison shook her head. Don't. I didn't say anything. You don't have to. He lowered his voice. She asked you a fair question. She's 12 and she saw what I refused to see. Madison's eyes filled. So now I'm the villain in my own family. This isn't about villains. It certainly feels like it. Ethan looked exhausted. This is about what we've become. We. That surprised her. He didn't put everything on Madison. I let you manage my mother like she was a liability, he continued. I cared more about what Reynolds thought of me than what kind of man I was becoming. Madison looked at me. You've turned him against me. No. I shook my head. I won't tell Ethan whether to stay married to you, leave you, forgive you, or fight with you. That's his marriage. Then I looked at my son. But who you become inside that marriage is your responsibility. He nodded slowly. Madison wiped at her eyes and walked toward the front door. Ethan followed her. Before leaving, he turned back. Mom, yes. Reynolds wants me at the negotiation tomorrow. Then go. What if Harrison refuses the revisions? Then someone else may build the project. His eyebrows rose. What I told him about Bill's other interested investors. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Harrison doesn't know, do they? Not yet. He almost laughed. Robert would have recognized that expression. So did I. For years, Ethan had believed power belonged to whoever had the biggest office, the richest investors, or the most impressive title. Now, he was learning something different. Sometimes power simply belongs to the person willing to walk away. And this time, that person wasn't standing at the back door. For months later, I stood beneath one of the live oaks Harrison development had once planned to remove. Its branches stretched across the garden like old arms protecting the house. Bill stood beside me holding 2 cups of coffee. You look pleased with yourself, he said. I am pleased with the tree. Same expression. I took the coffee. Behind us, several survey markers showed where construction would eventually begin. Not 38 residences. 26, the access road had been moved east. The historic garden would remain intact. The carriage house received permanent preservation restrictions and the live oaks had been specifically protected in the final development agreement. Harrison had complained about every change. Then Bill told them another investment group was interested. Suddenly the impossible became negotiable. Funny how quickly people discover flexibility when they realize you have choices. The final agreement also established a community fund to help small businesses affected during construction. When Bill asked what we should call it, I didn't hesitate. The Robert Coleman Small Business Fund. The first time I saw Robert's name printed on the proposal, I had to leave the room, not because I was sad, because I could hear him objecting. Paige, don't put my name on anything. Then he would have secretly kept 3 copies. That was Robert. He disliked recognition, but treasured evidence that something mattered. Ethan kept his job. He didn't get the promotion, at least not the one Madison had planned the party to celebrate. Reynolds told him the senior vice president decision would be delayed. Months earlier, that news would have devastated him. Instead, Ethan called me and said, "I'm disappointed." I waited. That's it. What else should I be? I don't know. Angry I was for about an hour. And now I think I would have hated getting promoted because I pressured my mother into a deal. That was when I began believing his change might last. Not because he stopped wanting success. There was nothing wrong with ambition. But he was finally learning that the way you reach a destination becomes part of what you find when you arrive. He also stopped calling himself self-made. I discovered that accidentally. Bill and I attended a planning luncheon where Ethan introduced himself to a new consultant. The man mentioned reading Ethan's professional profile. "You've built quite a career from scratch." Ethan glanced at me. "Not from scratch," he said. "I had more help than I understood at the time. That was all. No speech, no dramatic apology, just the truth." Madison was more complicated. She apologized to me again 3 weeks after the argument at my house. This time there were no contracts waiting to be signed. No investors, no reason for her to need anything from me. "I was cruel," she said. We were sitting on my porch. Yes, she flinched. Perhaps she had expected me to make forgiveness easier. I was obsessed with how people saw us. I know. I thought if everything looked perfect, eventually I'd feel secure. Did it work? She gave a sad laugh. No, I didn't tell her everything was fine. It wasn't. "I want us to start over," she said. "I don't." Her eyes widened. I continued before she could misunderstand. Starting over would mean pretending nothing happened. I don't want that. Then what do you want to move forward? What's the difference? Moving forward means remembering what happened and behaving differently because of it. She nodded slowly. I told her my boundaries. No comments about my clothes. No correcting me in front of people. No deciding which conversations I was suitable for. And never again using Lily to manage adult relationships. Madison agreed. Trust did not return because she agreed. Trust doesn't work like a light switch. It came back in inches. Sometimes it moved backward. Ethan and Madison began marriage counseling. I never asked what they discussed. That belonged to them. What I noticed was that Ethan stopped automatically checking Madison's expression before making decisions. And Madison began catching herself before turning every family gathering into a performance. They weren't fixed. People aren't furniture, but they were trying. Ethan's visits changed, too. Before Beaumont, he usually came because something needed doing. A holiday, a birthday, a family obligation. Then one Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. He stood outside holding 2 coffees. "What's wrong?" I asked. Nothing. What do you need? Nothing. Are you sick? He laughed. Can I come in? We sat on the porch for nearly an hour. We talked about absolutely nothing important. A neighbor's new fence, Lily's science project, a terrible restaurant he'd visited. At one point, I realized Ethan hadn't checked his phone in 20 minutes. Robert would have considered that a miracle. You know, Ethan said, Dad would have liked sitting out here. He did. I wish I'd done it more. You were busy growing up. I stayed busy after I was grown. I looked at him. You can regret yesterday without wasting today regretting it. He smiled. That sounds like Dad. It was. Of course. We drank our coffee, no property, no contract, no apology, just mother and son. Months earlier, I thought healing would arrive in some grand moment. I had imagined Ethan making a perfect apology or Madison finally understanding exactly how deeply she had hurt me. But healing wasn't dramatic. It was Ethan showing up with coffee. It was Madison asking before rearranging Thanksgiving plans. It was Lily no longer looking nervous when all of us sat at the same table. It was me learning that forgiveness did not require surrendering my boundaries. That afternoon at Beaumont, Bill and I walked back toward the house. Construction equipment waited beyond the protected garden. Next spring, Bill said we should hold the first fundraiser here for the fund. Where else? I looked toward the front entrance. For 1 second, I saw myself standing there again in my navy dress, holding Ethan's silver-wrapped gift while Caroline pointed toward the service path. The memory still hurt. Maybe it always would, but it no longer controlled what came afterward. When I asked, April, I smiled. Then let's do it properly. Bill grinned. Front entrance, I looked at him. Only one I plan on using. And as we walked beneath the old live oaks toward Bowman Estate, I realized the greatest thing we had preserved wasn't the garden. It was the possibility that something damaged could still grow differently. 1 year after the night I was told to use the back entrance, I found myself standing at the bottom of the same stone steps. Beaumont Estate looked almost exactly as it had that evening, the white columns, the tall windows, the warm chandeliers glowing behind the glass. But I was different. Grandma, are you coming? Lily stood 2 steps above me. She was 13 now and had somehow grown several inches without asking anyone's permission. I'm coming. You're just staring. I know. She came back down. Then she looked at my dress. You wore the same one. I smiled. The navy dress. Robert's favorite. I thought it deserved a better memory. Lily slipped her hand into mine. Together, we looked toward the entrance. A banner inside announced the inaugural fundraiser for the Robert Coleman Small Business Fund. Local restaurant owners, shopkeepers, contractors, investors, and community leaders filled the ballroom. The fund had already approved its first grants. One went to a family bakery replacing equipment after a flood. Another helped a young woman expand her cleaning business. A third helped a small auto shop survive road construction near its property. Robert would have hated the attention attached to his name and loved every person the money helped. Page Caroline came through the doors. A year earlier she had stood on those steps unable to look me in the eye. Now she came straight toward me and hugged me. You look beautiful. Thank you. She glanced at the dress and recognized it. Is that the same one? Her expression softened. Good. Caroline had remained at Beaumont Estate. Over the past year, we had become unlikely friends. She once apologized again for what happened. I told her she didn't need to. She had been placed in an unfair position and had eventually told the truth when doing so could have cost her job. That mattered. Bill is already inside. She said he's pretending he isn't nervous. He's terrible at pretending. I know. Lily tugged my hand. Come on. We climbed. Halfway up, I saw Bill through the glass. He spotted me and smiled. For a second, I expected him to come outside. Then he stayed where he was. I understood why. He didn't need to rescue me this time. Someone else was already moving toward the door. Ethan. He stepped outside. He wore a dark suit, but no tie. And there was something easier about him now. Mom. Hello. He looked at my dress. I remember that. I should hope so. His eyes dropped briefly. I wish I didn't remember why. I don't. That surprised him. Really? I wish it hadn't happened. That's different. He considered that, then nodded. Fair enough. He offered me his hand. I looked at it, then at him. Are you escorting me? I thought I'd try. I know the way. I know. I took his hand anyway. Lily walked on my other side. Together, we entered Beaumont Estate. Nobody stopped us. Nobody redirected us. And yet, the moment didn't feel triumphant in the way I once imagined justice should feel. It felt quiet, right? Bill met us inside. About time. I was outside 30 seconds. I'm 73. 30 seconds matters. I hugged him. The evening began. There were speeches from local business owners and a presentation about the preservation work around Beaumont Estate. Then Bill stepped to the microphone. I've been told to keep this short. I called from my table. For once, listen. People laughed. Bill pointed at me. That woman has been telling me what to do for nearly 30 years. More laughter. Then he spoke about Robert. Not the investment, not the money. He told them about the man who showed up when things were difficult. About loyalty, about building businesses that didn't forget people. When Bill finished, Ethan approached the microphone. I hadn't known he planned to speak. He looked nervous. That was new. Ethan had spoken before rooms full of executives without blinking. But tonight, he looked toward me before beginning. A year ago, I stood in this room celebrating what I thought was success. The room quieted. I believed success meant being respected by the right people, having the right title, and proving I belonged in rooms like this. My throat tightened. I was so focused on impressing people that I failed to respect someone who had been there long before any of them knew my name. He looked directly at me. This is my mother, Paige Coleman. Every eye in the room turned toward me. A year earlier, that would have made me uncomfortable. This time, I let them look. Everything good I ever built started with what she and my father gave me. Ethan paused. Not just money, opportunity, work ethic, second chances. His voice caught slightly. I spent years calling myself self-made. I wasn't. None of us are. I felt Lily squeeze my hand beneath the table. Ethan didn't tell the story of the back entrance. He didn't need to. This wasn't a public confession designed to earn forgiveness. It was something simpler. He was finally telling the truth about where he came from. After the applause, Ethan returned to the table. Too much, he whispered. Almost. He smiled. Later, I stepped outside for air. I stood at the top of the front staircase and looked toward the side of the building. Beyond the hedges was the narrow path leading to the service entrance. I remembered Caroline pointing toward it. I remembered the humiliation. Most of all, I remembered Ethan seeing me and remaining inside. For a long time, I thought that was the story. It wasn't. The story was what happened after Ethan joined me. You okay? Yes. He followed my gaze. I'll regret that night for the rest of my life. I shook my head. Don't. How can I not? Regret is useful only if it changes what you do next. He looked at me. That sounds like Dad. Everything wise, I say, eventually turns out to be something Robert said first. Ethan laughed. Lily came outside. Why is everyone standing around? Dessert is coming. That, I said, is a serious matter. She took my hand. Ethan offered his arm. I took that, too. As we walked back through the main entrance, I finally understood what I had wanted all along. Not revenge, not Ethan's humiliation, not Madison's defeat. I wanted my son to stop being ashamed of where he began. People will sometimes try to decide which door you deserve. The front, the back, the one nobody notices. But a door never determines your worth. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let someone else's shame become your own. Looking back, I realized the cruelest part of that night wasn't being told to use the service entrance. It was seeing my son through the glass and watching him remain still. Madison gave the instruction, but Ethan's silence allowed it to happen. That's something I've learned about families. Hurt isn't always caused by the person who says the cruel thing. Sometimes it comes from the person who loves you, but decides staying comfortable is easier than standing beside you. Robert and I never raised Ethan expecting repayment. Most parents don't keep an account book of sleepless nights, tuition payments, postponed dreams, or sacrifices. Love isn't alone. But love without a price tag still deserves respect. When Ethan discovered I owned part of the land his project needed, I suddenly had power. I could have used it to humiliate him. I could have destroyed the deal simply because I was hurt. But revenge would have allowed that back entrance to define me. Instead, I learned something more valuable. Forgiveness and boundaries can exist together. You can love someone and still say, "You may never treat me that way again." You can forgive without pretending nothing happened. And people who truly regret hurting you should be willing to rebuild trust through actions, not demand that you erase the past. Ethan wasn't healed by one apology. Neither was our relationship. He changed through choices. He spoke when silence would have benefited him. He risked something he valued. He stopped hiding his beginnings. And slowly, I learned to trust him again. So, let me ask you, if you had been standing in my place that night, would you have gone through the back entrance, walked away, or turned around and confronted your family? And after discovering that your signature controlled the deal your son desperately needed, would you have signed? Could you forgive Madison? I'd genuinely like to know what you would have done. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story reminded you that dignity should never depend on someone else's approval, please like and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, second chances, and the strength it sometimes takes to walk through the front door again.